Hello and welcome to English II. I'm your online teacher, Miss Bear. We have been reading Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham Jail. The last time that we met, you guys did a mid-unit assessment, and I cannot wait to read some of your essays. Today, we are going to dig back into his letter and go a little bit further, and we're going to be looking at paragraphs, I don't have this in front of me, 22 and 23. So let's dig right in after I remind you of our end of the unit task, which will happen at lesson 20. You will rely on your reading and analysis of Letter from Birmingham Jail to write a well-developed response to the following prompt. Analyze how King develops and refines his claims to advance his purpose. And remember that we've been keeping up with all of the central ideas, all of the rhetorical devices, as well as the details that go along with those. You guys have been analyzing as we have progressed through this letter. You have kept up with some amazing notes, and that's how I just know that your mid-unit assessment that you guys took last time is going to be phenomenal, because you've done such a great job at keeping up with that analysis on those different tools that you've been given. So let's look at what we're going to be doing today. I am introducing our lesson agenda now. We had some homework, so we're going to have some homework accountability. We will listen to a masterful reading. We will have some reading and discussion. We will have a quick write, and then I will give you, close out the lesson with some additional homework. It's not too bad though. I hope that you are finding that the homework assignments are helping you get the information that you need. Also, you can see on your screen that we have the standards that we're going to be looking at this today. So if you want to learn more about what those standards mean, please dig into that. Feel free to. The teacher that's in your classroom can help you with that. So let's look at what your homework assignment was last night. You were to skim paragraph 11 and identify King's use of the semicolon. And so I want you to turn and talk and go back to that paragraph, all of the notes that you took, and discuss what is King's purpose in paragraphs 22 through 25, as well as the questions that are on your board that you answered about the semicolons. All right, so let's talk about that. So let's go into paragraphs 22 through 25, and you will see on the board some of those ideas that you guys were supposed to come up with, or some things that I heard you talking about as you were reviewing these with your partner. So his purpose in paragraphs 22 through 25 is to criticize the white moderate for their lack of action. And the evidence that supports this, again, you can see on your screen, King is rather disappointed that fellow clergymen would see his nonviolent efforts as those of an extremist. He's disappointed because he is further convinced that if our white brothers dismiss as rabble-rousers and outside agitators those who refuse, those of us who are working through the channels of nonviolent action and refuse to support our nonviolent efforts, this will lead inevitably to a frightening racial nightmare. And you can see on your screen some of the other things that I heard you guys discussing as you were working through this. Let's look at semicolons. That is one of those language standards that you need to be aware of. So when you talk about rhetorical devices and you're talking about rhetoric, semicolons can play a very important role in that. So let's look at the first question about semicolons. How does King's use of semicolons relate to his use of parallel structure in paragraph 11? King uses semicolons to join phrases that all have parallel structure, beginning when you have seen, when you see, and when you are. That creates that parallel structure that is part of that rhetorical device that shows that repetition, okay? So that repetition that parallel structure really heightens your awareness of what he's saying. So let's look at the next question that I asked you to analyze. How does King's use of semicolons and parallel structure advance his purpose in paragraph 11? So the semicolons make all of the dependent clauses into one long sentence, which emphasizes how overwhelming and long the horrific injustices and violations are. The parallel structure and repetition of when you have seen, when you see, when you are contributes to that emphasis. So I want you to be on the lookout for semicolons and their impact on the letter, on that rhetorical those rhetorical devices, and how he manages to interweave all of those different thoughts and ideas together using some specific punctuation. We've talked about specific word choices. Well, the specific punctuation makes a difference as well. So all of that can contribute to your analysis of this letter. Well, let's go ahead and move forward. And we're going to listen to Dr. King read his letter. So before we listen to those next paragraphs, make sure that you get a copy of the letter out and flip to paragraphs 22 and 23. And I'm looking at this on my notes, and I see that there is nothing in paragraphs 22 and 23 that is omitted from his speech nor added to this text. So go ahead and listen to that, and then we'll come back together and discuss those. Great job. Now let's look at what the curriculum is asking us to do now that we have read that letter. So I want you to work with a partner and reread paragraph 22 and answer the questions on your screen. Great job. As a reminder, I'm not going to be going over every single one of these questions. Your teacher that's in the classroom may choose to go over more of the questions that I will go over, but you should be working through all of these questions. You should be keeping those notes. Remember I said keep a binder so that you have all of these notes. And when you're working with a partner, you get to use two brains instead of one, and you should have more information than you would have if you were working independently. So let's look at the couple of questions that we're going to be reviewing for this. So in the second sentence of paragraph 22, why does King say he is disappointed? What is the impact of beginning his statement with the phrase, "at first"? And so some of the answers that I heard as I was walking around, King says he is disappointed that fellow clergymen would see his nonviolent efforts as those of an extremist. Okay? And then by beginning his statement with "at first," King indicates that later his thinking about being considered an extremist will develop. He says, you know, at first I thought this, and then so you know that later is coming, and now I believe that a different way. So that by beginning it that way, he is setting up how his thinking has changed. All right? So then, what is the impact of the allusion to a more excellent way? So this is a passage from the Bible that his fellow clergymen are likely to recognize. So King appeals to their shared ethics or religious beliefs. By using those same words, King is likening himself to the Apostle Paul, putting him on the moral high ground above his fellow clergymen. And then King's fellow clergymen are wrong for opposing this more excellent way. All right? Great job. Remember also that you are tracking your rhetorical impact tracking tool. You are using this tool, so I want you to go ahead with that same partner and track the rhetoric in paragraph 22. Good job. Let's look at a couple of more of those questions that we're going to answer together. So in the following statement in paragraph 22, what connection does King draw? I'm grateful to God that through the Negro Church, the dimension of nonviolence entered our struggle. King says that the Negro Church is responsible for introducing nonviolent efforts into the struggle for desegregation. By giving thanks to God, King draws a direct connection between God and nonviolent action. And then what is the impact of placing the illusion a more excellent way with this statement? Because King claims in the statement that nonviolent action comes through God, King puts the allusion to Paul's words with this bold statement to defend his claim. Okay? So if you have not been keeping up, if these are not the answers that you had, these are going to be the best answers. And so you really need to be taking notes and making sure that you are keeping up with the best answers. Let's look at a couple more before we move on. How does King use the allusion and statement together to appeal to his fellow clergymen? Because King's fellow clergymen are religious and would respect Paul, God, and the church, King appeals to their ethics and shows that he shares the same ethics that they have. And then what image does King create to contrast the more excellent way? King says that if the church had not introduced the dimension of nonviolence, then many streets of the South would be flowing with floods of blood. Y'all, that is a very intense way to contrast that more excellent way. The last time in history that we kind of thought about streets flooding with blood is during the American Revolution in Boston and all of the bloodbaths literally that happened on the streets of Boston. And so that's another allusion that he is referencing is that the American Revolution. So think about that as you hear some of those different things. Now, I'm going to put questions on the board, 2 more questions, and I want you to come up. I want you, your volunteers in the class, to come up and read the question along with the best answer and take notes for that. Great job. I love when you guys get engaged and you start offering your suggestions as well. Your suggestions are really good. Don't discount that your thoughts are not any better or not any good just because they're not the exact same that this curriculum has come up with. When you are talking about analysis, you need to be thinking about how each of us will break apart things differently, and we all bring what I call baggage with us to the analysis party because we all have different experiences that will have us looking at things differently. So keep that in mind, that just because these are some of the best answers doesn't mean they're the only answer that you can have, and it's not the only analysis that you can have when talking about King's letter. All right, now you need to go back to that rhetorical impact tracking tool and track some more of that rhetoric from paragraph 22. Great job. I cannot wait to see everything that you have added to that rhetorical impact tracking tool. All right, next I need you to work with a partner and reread paragraph 23 and answer the questions on your board. Great job. You guys did such a good job with the last set of questions that you came up and asked and discussed that I'm going to put a couple of questions on the board, and I want you to do the same thing again. So the first 2 questions that you guys will discuss: what is the impact of the allusion to the promised land, and what is the impact of the image prayer pilgrimages to City Hall? Great job. I love that energy that you guys have. I'll go over the last question that we're going to go over for this set. So, how does King use semicolons? Oh, here we go. And parallel structure in the sentence beginning. So let him march sometime to support his purpose in paragraph 23. So King makes a list of examples of the nonviolent ways that African Americans can get out their many pent-up resentments and latent frustrations, and that's from paragraph 23. King uses parallel structure to emphasize the white moderate that they should support these actions, because these forms of nonviolence are better than a frightening racial nightmare, from paragraph 22. So thinking about how we're using semicolons, or how King is using semicolons as a rhetorical device. So that leads us to what? That rhetorical impact tracking tool. So I'm going to give you a minute, and it says track his use of rhetoric in paragraph 22. We're actually tracking the rhetoric from paragraph 23. Great job. All right, now it is time to work independently, and we are going to do a quick write. So get your notebook paper out and answer the question. How does King's use of rhetoric advance his purpose in paragraphs 22 and 23? Use any of your notes, any of your tools that you have put together in order to write an effective paragraph. Fantastic job. I can't wait to read what you guys have put together. So last thing that we're going to do today is kind of wrap everything up, and let's look at where we're going next and the homework assignment for tonight. So you're going to reread paragraphs 24 and 25, and I want you to star every time you see the word extremists. Then I want you to conduct a brief search into the following people that King mentions in paragraph 24 and write a few sentences on each. So you have Jesus, you have Amos, the Apostle Paul, Martin Luther, and John Bunyan. So do all of that this evening. Again, reread paragraphs 24 and 25. How many times does he use the word extremist? And I want you I want you to star them, and I want you to go count those stars and write that number in your margin, because when you start counting that, I think you're going to be blown away, because I sure was. Until next time, happy learning.